From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here. And ahead today, a featured speaker at K-State's Cattlemen's Day last Friday, handling the cattle market segment from Oklahoma State University, Derrell Peel offers an overview of world beef import and export trends. Derrell talks about the state of the U.S. beef trade within that. Also today, the first installment of this week's series on the 6 Kansas farm and ranch couples who've been named to the Kansas Master Farmer, Master Farm Homemaker class of 2019. Today, we'll tell you about Grant and Gayla Corley of Anderson County. Later on then, Jeff Wickman with this week's 4-H segment. He'll visit with K-State's Shane Potter and Dona Ratliff about 4-H Discovery Days. Right here on Agriculture Today.
For information on threatening weather, you should depend on the National Weather Service and their broadcast on NOAA Weather Radio. NOAA Weather Radio is an all-hazards radio network that provides up-to-the-minute weather information, including life-saving warnings anytime, day or night. NOAA Weather Radio also broadcasts information on man-made disasters, such as chemical spills, Amber Alerts, or other national emergencies. For the National Weather Service, I'm Bill Curtis.
You're listening to Agriculture Today. Good to have you aboard once again as it's time for our weekly cattle market segment. It is Derrell Peel's turn in the rotation, livestock economist at Oklahoma State University, but with a different twist this time, for Derrell was in town for the 107th Cattlemen's Day at Kansas State University as one of the featured presenters, and he talked beef, imports, and exports largely there, which we'll obviously get into, but the markets as they have gone this past week, trying to find their way in the midst of the fog over the coronavirus.
That's right. You know, we've got so much uncertainty out there. Markets don't like uncertainty. And, you know, to some extent, that's one of the jobs, particularly of the futures market, is to sort of anticipate the worst until we have better information to know how bad worse is. And so we've certainly seen that, obviously, with the stock market taking the huge hits, the broader financial markets, the commodity futures markets follow that, and then ultimately they do weigh on cash markets. So we've seen it across the board. And this is a little different than a typical correction or a typical kind of a thing in financial markets where we might be moving money from one place to another. I saw a thing the other day that said, when did we hit the sell everything button? You know, that's kind of what's happening right now is we're sort of running for cover.
So where does this end, this fervor, this uncertainty? In fact, somebody asked you that at Cattlemen's Day expressly, and you said bluntly, we don't know.
We absolutely do not know. This is a different deal. You know, we describe this as a black swan type event, those unforeseen, unpredictable things that jump up and have huge impacts. But this is a little different than the kinds of things we've seen before in the beef industry. You know, most of these events, think of the packing plant fire in Holcomb last year, or, you know, even all the way back to BSE. Typically, those kind of things are a single event that happens at one point in time. It's, you know what it is, and you can pretty quickly then start to think about the path to recovery. This one is very different. It's much more amorphous. You know, it's fluid. We don't know where it's going. We pretty sure we haven't reached the worst of it yet, but we aren't going to know for a while when that is. We're not going to know till after the fact that it was the top, and then it's still going to be questions about how long it takes to play out. So bottom line is massive amounts of uncertainty going forward.
Stay tuned on that. But you spoke mostly in your presentation about the shifting sands of worldwide beef imports and exports and new players coming in. We'll dwell on China as a destination in just a moment, but the U.S. is facing some competition from countries that traditionally have not been in this game.
You know, Brazil is the leading beef export country in the world. Australia, for many years, was the leading country in the world. They're actually struggling right now, and in fact, the U.S. may actually exceed them a little bit in 2020. We're all aware of the massive wildfires and the droughts that precipitated those fires in Australia, so they've got real issues internally in terms of maintaining production. India, in a very different vein, but it is a major beef producer and exporter. New Zealand is another one, and so the U.S. is playing in a somewhat dynamic global environment right now.
When you look, though, at specifically Brazil and Australia, as you pointed out in your presentation, they are courting China with some success.
You know, the China market has just exploded in the last 2 years. And so, yeah, the South American exporters and Australia and New Zealand all are the ones supplying that market right now. They've been, they're available, the product's right, the trading relationship was right, and so they've enjoyed tremendous growth in exports to China, sometimes at the expense of other markets they were exporting to. In other cases, it's a function of growth in those markets. So dramatic changes in that scene, really driven at this point by China.
You shared a number that was attention-getting, and that was that China is now importing 30% of world imports of beef. Is that correct?
That's right, and that's a massive change. Started growing maybe 5 or 6 years ago, but really in the last 2 years, just seen, again, an explosion of beef imports in China. And again, it's a country that, even though they don't consume a lot of beef, and they may have only added 1 pound to per capita beef consumption, but with a population like you have in China, that's a big amount of beef. And so you see tremendous growth in that market.
And that growth tripled since 2017. You pointed that out. The U.S. is still way down the ladder in as far as beef exports to China, as far as the U.S. export lineup is concerned.
That's right. We've never really had a presence in the Chinese market before. Of course, we were closed for a lot of years after BSE. We finally got access politically in 2017. And then since then, of course, we've been wrapped up in a trade war most of the time. So that has further made it difficult for us to really get down to the work of marketing beef in China. And so hopefully we're getting closer to being able to do that. But that means we've got work ahead of us to develop that market. It's not necessarily a market that's just instantly available to us. We're going to have to get in there and figure out exactly what kind of products, what kind of price levels, and so on are going to make us competitive in that market.
We'll speak to that a bit more in just a second here. One of the things you pointed out to the audience at Cattlemen's Day on the potential of U.S. beef exports to China, how much even an incremental increase in exports to that country on a percentage basis would mean to our industry.
That's right. We talked about those other players that are dominating that market right now. And I think, the U.S. doesn't really have to come in there and try to take away massive amounts of their market share right now. 2% or 5% share of the Chinese beef market as it stands today, maybe 10% would be a tremendous increase in U.S. beef exports, not only to China, but in total, assuming that we could do that in addition to the other markets that we already have as major beef export markets.
Now, Derrell, you've been to China. You've seen firsthand in recent years a bit about that market. What do the Chinese want in their beef product?
Well, again, pork is their big meat. They don't eat a lot of beef, and it certainly varies across the population. It varies somewhat regionally. But, again, we're talking about a cuisine, for the most part, that uses moist heat cooking, small product sizes, portion sizes. So it's not a market for steaks. We're not going to come in there and send a lot of boxes of steaks, for the most part, to China. That could grow over time, but that won't be where we start. And again, it's a relatively low-income market in many cases, at least middle income. So price is important. The types of products, lower-valued products, are going to be what work there. So we're probably talking about end meats, things that would not be our highest valued products, but that's where the growth potential is, and certainly where it starts in China.
Actually, that dovetails into another point that you pressed to the audience in your presentation about thinking about beef exports in the aggregate. You would rather we think as an industry in the disaggregate, that is, beef is not equal across the board as we look at market demand.
That's exactly right. And I think economists actually contributed to this problem over the years because we've talked about beef demand like it's one thing. We tend to want to draw that supply and demand graph with one line on it and say this is beef demand. But it's not. Beef is many different products, and ultimately each one of those products is a separate market. There's a lot of interaction across various kinds of retail markets for those beef products. And so beef demand is really an intensely complex issue that we have to pay attention to, and that becomes particularly important when we think about trade, because those markets, depending on what destination we're talking about for exports, are going to be for specific products with specific demands for those products, and we have to be very aware of that.
So is that to say the U.S. beef industry needs to be more astute in thinking in those terms of marketing products that maybe we don't consume as much, say, domestically?
I think the real opportunity in China, again, is going to be for some of those end meat products. I don't know that this is revealing anything, but, China recently cleared the way for the over 30-month of age rule. It may well be that there's potential for marketing, even older animals, cull cow beef. Now, that would compete with our ground beef market. So there's a lot of things that could change here that we have to see. But, yeah, I think we're talking for the most part about products that have less demand and less value in the U.S. market, but they may be able to add to value if we can send them to a market like China.
Well, broadly, Derrell, you think about U.S. beef exports, opportunities out there, but it has to be approached strategically. Hate to use that word, but that's appropriate here.
Oh, absolutely. It is, and it's something we have to recognize that marketing is a verb as well as, it's not that the market is instantly there. We have to go earn that market, and that's done on a company-to-company basis, on a product-to-product basis. Obviously, we have organizations like the U.S. Meat Export Federation that tries to help that process, but again, at that level, it becomes much more than just thinking about the aggregate. We've got to think in terms of individual products.
All right, then, and before we let you go, your thoughts on the market in the week ahead. Anybody's guess?
Well, it really is. I think we're still very much on the defensive. We're liable to stay on the defensive, I think, for some period of time. We see some day-to-day volatility. That's a challenge in itself. If somebody's in a situation right now, a producer really needs to market some cattle sooner rather than later, I think you just have to watch for these day-to-day little breaks, little corrections, and take advantage of those. I don't think this situation lends itself to sort of waiting for some sort of definitive news that would allow this thing to just kind of go away. I don't think it's going to happen that way. So I think we have to be prepared to kind of live with this and again, take advantage of little moves in the market. If you got to do something, beyond that, just try to stay as flexible and nimble as you can.
Great to have you here in Manhattan in person. We will catch up with you again in a few weeks. Thanks for these comments and certainly for a fine presentation at Cattlemen's Day at K-State.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. I've enjoyed being here.
He's Derrell Peel, livestock economist at Oklahoma State University and one of the featured presenters at the 2020 Cattlemen's Day at Kansas State this past Friday on Agriculture Today.
Kansas farmers and ranchers are helping feed your family in the world. The largest contributor to the Kansas economy is beef cattle. How do you get that juicy steak on your plate? In order for you to enjoy your tasty meal, it requires the hard work of the producers, marketers, advertisers, processors, inspectors, transporters, packers, and consumers. So thank all these people and sit back, relax, and enjoy your tasty meal.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today. This coming Friday, 6 outstanding Kansas farm and ranch couples will be recognized as Kansas Master Farmers, Master Farm Homemakers in ceremonies here in Manhattan. They make up the class of 2019, nominated by their local extension boards and then chosen by a specially appointed selection committee based on their accomplishments in production agriculture, family living, and community service. This program extends all the way back to 1927. The Cooperative Extension Service at Kansas State University has sponsored it from the outset. Extension partners now with Kansas Farmer Magazine to make this recognition possible. All this week on the broadcast, we'll share the stories of each of these couples in alphabetical order. Grant and Gayla Corley are well-rooted in western Anderson County, east central Kansas. Grant really never ventured from the farm. Upon graduating from high school, he went right into full-time farming with his father on the family operation near Westphalia. Gayla was raised on a farm not far away, and after finishing nursing school, she and Grant married and settled in on the place where they eventually raised their 3 children. Crop and cattle production, the mainstays of the Corley operation, now covering 800 acres. It came to feature a flourishing certified seed production and processing operation, leading to seed sales over a large territory, reaching as far as Texas. Additionally, over the years, the Corleys have been deeply involved in a wide assortment of church and community activities. Grant recalls how it all began for him in the very early going.
My first tractor, I was only 12 years old when I bought it. And we bought it over at Burlington and got the paperwork all filled out. And the dealer said, Ned, which is my father, you're going to have to countersign it. And he says, Dad says, nope, I'm not going to do that. If he don't make the payments, he'll lose it. And he's got to learn that.
And how old were you, 12?
12. I paid for the tractor hauling hay that summer and bought a 2-bottom plow with it and a 2-row cultivator. I was in tall cotton, 12 years old. And not too many years after that, we parked the plow and done minimum tillage for a few years and went on up to less and less tillage. And in 1971, I was on the Soil Conservation Board, and our DC got to talking to me about no-till, and we started playing with no-till in 1971. In 1973, by then I could see that chemicals, we needed more than chemicals to get it done, and so I shoved my planter units together and went to 20-inch rows, and I've been in 20-inch rows ever since. And it made weed control and no-till much better. And today, I've got a 24-row, 20-inch planter.
You started farming right out of high school, correct?
Yes. I put the first crop in 1961, and I graduated in 1961. And we was having some pretty tough times financially in the family, and there just wasn't money for me to go to college, and I had a farm to take care of and a tractor, and so you know what I was doing.
And it worked out quite well.
Well, so far it has.
Gayla, you grew up in this area as well?
I grew up at Mount Ida, which is about 8 miles east and a little south of here. And my father farmed there, and then in 1958, Dad moved to Westphalia, and so he rented a farm here, and it was across the road from Grant's, where Grant's parents farmed.
So you got to know each other fairly early in life.
Yes.
And you were familiar with the farm, you knew all about it, so you were thinking that you were destined down this path too?
I helped my father from the time I could get big enough to go out the field with him, and I drove the tractor, I run the combine, cultivated, plowed, disc, whatever had to be done in the farm, milked the cows, I did it. Then when I graduated, I went to Kansas City to nursing school at Kansas City General Hospital, and from there I went into the Army and spent 3 years in the Army and came back home, and we were married.
And you continued your nursing career, though, after?
Oh, yeah. Well, I did. I went back to work in January the 2nd of 1959. And I worked at the Anderson County Hospital for 38 years.
Back when we had hogs, she was on the edge of being my veterinarian in a lot of things. I mean, she knew, done a lot of giving shots and that sort of thing, and so it worked together quite well.
You got out of the hogs at some point, though, and concentrated primarily on cattle on the livestock side.
Well, we didn't have any cattle for a while, but our best years have been when we had livestock to market our grain through the livestock rather than as just grain. And we had to improve the value of it some way, and that's one of the reasons we got into the soybean seed business and the wheat seed business. You got into the certified seed business. Yes. Pretty much all in on that, weren't you? Yes, that was one of our big thrusts, and that worked out well for us until the Roundup event occurred, and that made a lot of things a little tougher to deal with. We'll talk about, though, the prosperous years with the seed business, the soybean seeds. Primarily, were you working with any other crops as well, or strictly soybeans? Wheat. We done wheat, and I've cleaned a lot of clover seed. My goal when we built the plant was to clean 10,000 bushel a year. And in 3 years, with what we was cleaning for ourselves, there was some years there that we cleaned 100,000 bushel a year. We built our own elevator legs. We build our own belt conveyors. Most of the button stuff in there is actually the clipper cleaner and the Oliver gravity table. And we modified that table quite a bit. It's not supposed to be able to keep up with the cleaner we've got, and we've got it set up. It outruns the cleaner by quite a bit.
And you're still operating, correct? You're
yes.
Still going.
Soybeans, there's not many that are not traded to where you can't clean them and reuse them. But there's, in the non-GMO stuff, we still do some of that. And so, yes, we still clean beans and bag them. We bag them in 50-pound bags, 2,000-pound bags, and bulk. However you wanted them, but we tried to get there.
And you had clientele not only here in this region, but even as far south as Texas. So.
Yes. Yeah, we got up to at one time where we was running 25 semi-loads a year going to northeast Texas. Some of the K-State varieties that we were using at that time, and this was also before the Roundup event, they performed very well as an early variety in northeast Texas.
Bring back in Gayla and talk about some of the things that you and Grant have been involved with off-farm. And for one thing, you are very engaged in extension and 4-H activities here in Anderson County, have been over the years, right?
Yes. Of course, we both were in 4-H growing up. And when our children got old enough, they started right into 4-H also. And then later on, after the kids, begin to get out of 4-H, there was, when our son was in 4-H, he had some friends that they were interested in rocks, fossils, and they have a project in 4-H called geology. And so in 1993, I started as a geology project leader for Cherry Mound 4-H Club. And from that, it evolved. I was countywide 4-H leader, and that evolved into judging, and I judged at county fairs. I still do. And I judged at the Kansas State Fair in geology for I don't know how many years. And I've led state trips and did workshops and state trips, and just a lot of those things.
And Grant, you've worked with extension personnel to help your business along, and otherwise yes. over the many years.
Oh yes. We've been very well blessed here down through the years. We've had some excellent agents, county agents, 4-H agents. I've asked for help from them, all of them, from management decisions, cattle, crops. I've gotten a lot of my education come from K-State, but I didn't get to do it directly. And so I've been very, very thankful.
From Anderson County in east central Kansas, Grant and Gayla Corley. They're among the 6 Kansas Master Farm Homemaker couples this year. Again, they'll be so recognized at a banquet in their honor this coming Friday in Manhattan. Tomorrow, right here, a talk with another of the couples from southwest Kansas, this time Mark and Eva Gardner of Clark County. We'll be back in a few moments. You're listening to Agriculture Today.
Did you know every Kansas farmer feeds 128-plus people?
Kansas farmers are hard workers, dependable, authentic, and sensitive.
Not only do farmers put food on your table, but they put clothes on your back and fuel in your car.
For more information about Kansas farmers, visit K-State Research and Extension online or stop by your local Extension office. This message has been brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Coming to you from the campus of Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Welcome back. Eric Atkinson here. And now, today's agricultural news headlines for you, courtesy in part of DTN. Well, wildland fire personnel, as well as Tanker 95 from the Kansas Forest Service at K-State, were assigned to that 412 fire in Beaver County, Oklahoma over the weekend, just across the border from Meade and Clark counties in Kansas. The fire has burned 29,000 acres, according to the Oklahoma Forestry Service. The crews continued to improve the control lines, mopping up and suppressing hot spots. The fire is 50% contained as of last report. That light rain overnight did help the cause. Now, multiple Kansas volunteer fire departments, as well as the Clark County Wildland Fire Task Force, were also on the scene to assist local resources with the 412 fire. In addition to that support of resources on scene, the 7-county Wildland Fire Task Force was in Meade County to provide fire response coverage, while the local fire departments assisted with the 412 fire. The Forest Service working closely with the Oklahoma Forestry Services to make resources available, assigning those resources across state lines made possible by that Great Plains Interstate Fire Compact. The 412 fire occurs one day after the 3-year anniversary of the historical Starbuck fire that burned across Oklahoma and Kansas. You'll recall the Starbuck fire burned more than 500,000 acres. State and county officials estimated at least $50 million in total damage as a result of that fire. USDA Secretary Sonny Perdue shares reasons why the U.S. is once again allowing beef imports from Brazil. In this report from the USDA's Stephanie Ho.
Ag Secretary Sonny Perdue defended a recently announced decision to allow imports of beef from Brazil after a 2-year suspension because of food safety violations.
In countries where we have trade agreements there, aside from other just outright protectionism, we have to have equivalent safety standards. That's what FSIS does. They go down and do audits of their food safety inspection system to make sure that they believe it's equivalent to U.S. systems.
His comments came in testimony to the House Agriculture Committee.
As a safeguard beyond that, we also have a stepped-up inspection, not an audit, but an inspection of the product coming in to make sure they are continuing to comply.
How long will the stepped-up inspections be in place?
I think it'll be dynamic as we see continued compliance over a period of months or years. You probably can see some relaxation to see that they're continuing to comply.
This is Stephanie Ho for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Some Chinese soybean crushers have applied for and have been granted tariff exemptions to import soybeans, according to sources cited by Reuters, with the exemptions in place for a year, in line with an announcement from the Chinese government last month. That report also said exemptions have been granted for U.S. sorghum, wheat, and distillers' dried grains. U.S. Dairy Export Council President and CEO Tom Vilsack added this week that exemptions for dairy products were also being granted. The report indicated there were no issues for importers to get the exemptions. With the government announcement of the exemption availability, that signals a decision that would be made within a matter of days after the request for the 1-year exemption was made. And the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Agricultural Marketing Service is now seeking nominees for the United Sorghum Checkoff Program Board to fill 5 vacant producer positions, including one to represent Kansas, as well as one representing Texas, and 3 at-large positions. The deadline for nominations, May 11th. Any U.S. sorghum producer who owns or shares in the ownership and risk of loss of sorghum can be considered for nomination. Secretary Perdue will select individuals from those nominations submitted by the certified producer organizations. To find out more information about qualifying for a position on that board, go to sorghumcheckoff.com. Again, that's sorghumcheckoff, all one word, .com. Now, this week's edition of Tree Tales. Here's K-State Forester Bob Atkinson. Bob?
Each year, the USDA Forest Service, in cooperation with the Kansas Forest Service, inventories the condition and the size of forests in Kansas. The data tends to take a couple years to be published, and therefore we've just received 2018 information. The 2018 inventory found that Kansas has 2,483,060 acres of forest land. That is about 5% of our land area. This data is based upon forests being defined as 1 acre in size, at least 120 feet wide, with 10% canopy cover. 92.5% of our forests in Kansas are privately owned, with 4.7% being federal and 2.7% state and local government owned. Each year, about 53,838 acres of non-forest becomes forest land, and about 61,466 acres is converted from forest to other land uses. Since 2013, there has been a gradual decline in forest land by about 50,000 acres, which is a change in the historical trend of forest land, increasing each year since our first inventory in 1939. This may be due to conversion of riparian forest to cropland and increased efforts to remove woody encroachment from our grasslands. Each year, 6,925 acres of forest land are treated through forest stand improvement practices by Kansas Forest Service foresters and private forestry consultants, and also through timber harvests. An estimated 14,614 acres of forest land are disturbed annually by fire, and another 4,690 acres by weather events such as ice storms, tornadoes, and high winds. Oak hickory remains the dominant forest type, covering about 1.3 million acres, followed by elm, ash, and cottonwood at 783,500 acres. Eastern red cedar makes up 111,000 acres and is a concern spreading into grasslands and some of our forested areas. In addition to forest land, there is another 1.2 million acres of trees that do not meet forest land definitions, called trees outside of forests. These include our windbreaks and our riparian woodlands adjacent to our streams. So a total of 3.7 million acres of trees in Kansas provide clean water, air, wildlife habitat, recreation, and timber products. The Kansas Forest Service can help you plan a new tree planting or manage this valuable resource. Why not call us today at 785-532-3300 or check us out on the web at www.kansasforests.org. This is Bob Atkinson. You've been listening to another Tree Tale.
Thanks, Bob. And this is Agriculture Today.
When you are in need of timely, reliable, and trusted information, K-State Research and Extension is here. Whether it's organizing people, information, or resources, they have the necessary tools. Community comes first for K-State Research and Extension. For more information and to connect with your county's extension agents, visit www.ksre.k-state.edu.
This is Agriculture Today. I'm Jeff Wickman. Kansas 4-H Discovery Days, a chance for youth to explore projects, gain leadership and communication skills, and learn more about educational opportunities after high school, is being held in late May on the Kansas State University campus in Manhattan. Kansas 4-H Program Coordinator Dona Ratliff and 4-H Collegiate Specialist Shane Potter join us to preview this year's event. 4-H Discovery Days, one of the highlights for a lot of 4-Hers, is coming up May 27th through the 29th. Right now, a chance to preview some of those events. As I said, May 27th through the 29th, and it all takes place on the K-State campus, Donna?
That's correct. We will have youth who are 13 to 18 years old come to campus that Wednesday through Friday.
And Shane, in terms of what they can expect, what kind of things will be going on?
Well, as the name notes, it's Discovery Day, and that's really how we see the event. It's their opportunity to discover what are their options. So we've arranged the camp as a way to look at career and college opportunities. So all of the workshops and our speakers are really geared towards exploring what is post-secondary education. What does it mean when you're through with high school? What are those next steps? So they have that opportunity to pick things that are of interest to them and try them out.
And Donna, they're picking these in advance or when they get here?
Yes, when they register, they will be asked to pick up their classes that they're interested in as they are actually in their registration system.
So what are some of the things that you think about, Shane, then, in terms of what they might be interested in order to kind of set up your agenda?
Mm-hmm. So there's a few ways that you can look at discovering what you might have an interest in. So there are things around general career and college readiness. We'll have some workshops where they're understanding, how do they apply for a scholarship? How do they frame what they're good at? Those core competencies. And then there are also opportunities for them to look at a deeper dive into an academic area. So let's say they really love journalism or would like to learn about animal science or engineering. They can go explore that, engage with faculty, and have a really good experience to find out, is that something I want to do as a career or as an academic option?
And Donna, this is kind of a nice age range because they really are starting to think about that. They're starting to plan ahead and really probably able to really discern what they're interested in.
Absolutely. So this is the same age range of people that are starting to take those college classes when they're in high school even to prepare them. And so by the time they're walking out of their graduation doors from their high school, a lot of them have, at least a semester, if not more, done. And so it's good for them to be prepared to know maybe what they're interested in as they walk into college, because a lot of times they're far enough along, they're going to be taking some core classes. So this will give them a little bit better idea of something they might be interested in. They can dive a little more deeper into their engineering opportunities if they're, thinking about coming to K-State or ag-related fields.
And a lot of this ties back to what they do in 4-H from the very get-go. They're kind of setting that foundation for not only learning, but getting the hands-on experience.
It does. And so that is another goal of our program, is that we're helping provide opportunities and experiences that connect back to what they're doing in 4-H. And the whole idea is to prepare them to be more successful in the future. So as we look at our goals, we want to have them be able to do creative problem solving, to network with people. So they're coming to this event, they're meeting people from across the state that there's a good chance they're going to go to college with or work with in the future. And they're making those connections. So it's not only what they've been doing throughout their entire 4-H experience, but it's that next step on how they're going to apply it and really use that information to make informed decisions and really be prepared to be successful in that next step.
I assume then they are housed on the campus and they also have an opportunity to see some of these buildings and programs firsthand?
Exactly. They will be staying in one of the dorm facilities. We're working with the university for that. So they'll experience dorm life. They'll experience eating in one of the dining halls. And then, yes, our classes are usually held in some of the main halls here on campus. And so they'll get to see what a classroom's like and what's available to them.
Doesn't sound like this is something that they want to miss out on. So I want to make sure that they have a chance to get registered. What's the process?
So on March 16th, registration will open on our website, and that is at kansas4h.org under the events tab, and it's Discovery Days.
So what do they need to know? I'm assuming there's going to be a cost involved because they're going to be here at least a couple of nights.
Right. I believe the cost is around $195, and that covers their food while they're on campus and such as well. So they'll have their dining and their housing paid for with that. Along with that, a T-shirt and a few other fun little items as they go.
A lot of them are used to the camping experiences because they do it at Rock Springs, but this is a little bit different because it's more of an academic setting.
It is, and really what we're trying to do is provide them an opportunity to try it out. What's it like to be on a college campus? What are the things they should be asking? If they're going to prepare in the future, most of the time youth don't really even know what are the things they need to know. What should they be asking? And by taking part in an experience like this, they are prepared. They're exposed to more opportunities, really in-depth, structured ways to explore that major. And what we found through this has been going on for a really long time now is that it does just as much to help youth figure out, no, that's not something that I want to do with the rest of my life, or that is my passion. We talk about having a spark in 4-H. And this is that way to delve deeper and discover, is that spark something you want to do with the rest of your life?
And maybe even to discover the fact that there are so many options within an area they may not even be aware of.
Yep, absolutely. And we intentionally strive to put in opportunities to explore. So we're discovering new things. So if they are interested in, engineering, there are so many applications that they could dive into. And by going and making a connection with faculty and staff at the university, they really have that opportunity to expand what they know and what their options are in the future.
So in addition to the 4-H personnel, you've also got people lined up from Kansas State that'll be there to answer questions?
Mm-hmm. So, we often think of 4-H and Extension. It's that first class at the university. And so we're there and we're working with the faculty from across the institution to really be that face and that connection with the youth. So not only are they, working with people they already know, because we'll have agents that are coming from the local units that are going to come and take part and help us, but it's building a connection with faculty on campus. And really, that way, if they do happen to choose to go to K-State, they're familiar. There's a family that they've grown to really know and engage with.
Is there a set number that you can handle, or is it open to whoever wants to register?
Right now, it's open to however many want to register.
And again, the registration information?
It'll be at kansas4h.org under the Events tab, Discovery Days. And registration will open March 16th.
That's Kansas 4-H Program Coordinator Dona Ratliff and 4-H Collegiate Specialist Shane Potter with a preview of this year's 4-H Discovery Days, set for May 27th through the 29th on the Kansas State University campus in Manhattan. For more information or to register, visit kansas4h.org. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. Along with Eric Atkinson, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.